A world empire was not ignited by hunger alone, nor by blind barbarism, but by a diplomatic murder so foolish that it exposed a deeper law of history. Civilizations rarely collapse because danger arrives. They collapse because power mistakes insult for strategy, wealth for resilience, and old assumptions for eternal truth. In the early 13th century AD, Eurasia stood at a hinge of transformation. Across the steppe, Genghis Khan had already done what settled empires long believed impossible. He had taken the volatile energies of nomadic confederation and forged from them not merely a raiding machine, but a governing instrument of conquest. The Mongol order was harsh, but it was not chaotic. It was built on mobility, discipline, intelligence gathering, and a command culture that rewarded competence over pedigree. That last trait mattered enormously. Many empires speak of merit while serving vanity. The Mongol state in these years had fewer illusions. Commanders rose through demonstrated ability. Operational goals were centralized, but field execution remained flexible. Scouts informed strategy. Punishment reinforced obedience. Diplomacy, commerce, reconnaissance, and war were not separate categories. They were parts of one imperial metabolism. To understand the war with Khwarazm, the first truth is this: the Mongols did not initially require its destruction. They required access, recognition, and stable exchange under conditions they could trust. South and west of the steppes stood the Khwarazmian Empire, glittering, expansive, and deeply vulnerable beneath its grandeur. Its domains stretched across vital arteries of Transoxiana and Persia, touching the arteries through which merchants, scholars, taxes, messages, and prestige moved across continents. This was no tribal frontier state waiting to be brushed aside. It was wealthy, urban, and strategically placed. Bokhara and Samarkand were not provincial outposts. They were civilizational centers, symbols of learning, commerce, and sovereign magnificence. Therefore, any war between Mongol and Khwarazmian power was never going to be a local quarrel. It was a struggle over the political gravity of Eurasia itself. But wealth often conceals decay. The Khwarazmian state possessed size, revenue, and cities. It lacked something more elusive and more decisive: deep coherence. Legitimacy was strained by internal rivalries. Provincial command was uneven. The relationship between center and periphery was burdened by distrust. Administrative reach was broad, but not always penetrating. The ruler, Shah Muhammad II, presided over a vast dominion, yet the very scale of that dominion encouraged illusions. A sprawling map can flatter a sovereign into believing command exists where only nominal obedience survives. The Silk Road, in this context, was not merely a network for silk, spices, and silver. It was diplomacy in motion. It was intelligence concealed inside commerce. It was tax revenue transformed into military possibility. It was prestige made visible. Whoever secured exchange did not simply enrich the treasury. Such a power shaped the movement of information, and therefore shaped the political imagination of continents. Here, the central paradox emerges. Genghis Khan, so often remembered as history's great destroyer, initially approached Khwarazm through trade. That fact is not incidental. It is the axis of the story. The coming war was not inevitable in some mechanical sense, as though two expanding empires simply had to collide because maps dislike empty space. It became inevitable because one side understood commerce as strategic architecture, while the other interpreted foreign movement through suspicion, court politics, and sovereign pride. This was the fault line: trade versus honor, mobility versus administrative bulk, information discipline versus court paranoia, imperial legitimacy versus imperial performance. The opening move was commercial and diplomatic. Genghis Khan dispatched a large caravan into Khwarazmian territory. Such a mission promised profit, certainly, but profit alone never explains state behavior at this level. A trade caravan could test routes, gauge local authority, assess political receptivity, and formalize relations. It could map the temperature of an empire without requiring battle. This was, in strategic terms, an offer wrapped in observation. At Otrar, that offer detonated. The city's governor, Inalchuk, accused the merchants of espionage. Perhaps he believed it. Perhaps he desired their goods. Perhaps he sought to display vigilance before a suspicious court. In history, motives often arrive mixed. Greed draped in caution, fear sharpened by ambition. Whatever the precise blend, the result was catastrophic. The merchants were seized. Their goods were confiscated. Many were killed or imprisoned. On the surface, this was a frontier outrage. But within the political language of Eurasia, it was far more dangerous. A state that cannot protect merchants cannot stabilize relations. A ruler who permits local officials to murder envoys or caravan agents signals either consent or weakness. In either case, the architecture of trust begins to fracture. Yet even then, war was not automatic. This is one of the great hinges of the age. Genghis Khan did not answer the Otrar incident with immediate invasion. He sent envoys demanding redress, punishment for the governor, restoration of norms, acknowledgement that an imperial relationship could not survive such behavior. For a conqueror famed for ferocity, this moment reveals strategic discipline. Violence was available. Diplomacy was chosen first. Then came the decision that doomed a civilization. Shah Muhammad II escalated. Accounts differ in the exact details, but the essential fact is clear. Mongol envoys were humiliated, and at least one was executed. In practical terms, this was madness. In symbolic terms, it was an announcement to the world that Khwarazm would not bend, would not apologize, and did not truly grasp the nature of the power it had affronted. Why would a ruler choose such a path? Because emerging forms of power are often hardest to recognize. Muhammad II likely saw the Mongols as dangerous nomads, formidable in open battle perhaps, but inherently limited. Horsemen could raid. Horsemen could devastate frontiers. But dismantle a rich urban empire spread across fortified cities and governed through Islamic administrative traditions? That must have seemed doubtful. Wealth and walls create a specific illusion. That time favors the defender, that scale is its own protection, that mobility must eventually exhaust itself against stone. But this judgment depended on an outdated understanding of the enemy. The Mongols were not merely swift riders emerging from the grasslands. They were a fast-learning imperial system. They excelled in reconnaissance, deception, signal discipline, and independent maneuver. Their columns could separate without losing strategic unity. Their commanders could adapt without waiting for ceremonial permission. They did not simply move faster than many rivals. They processed reality faster. This was the deeper contest. Not nomad against city, but adaptive command against ceremonial authority. The contrast in command systems became fatal once war began. Genghis Khan provided clear intent and unleashed talented subordinates capable of improvisation inside a disciplined framework. The Khwarazmian system, by contrast, was burdened by mutual suspicion. Local commanders could not fully trust the center. The center could not fully trust the provinces. Coherence suffered precisely where an empire most needs it, in crisis. Therefore, when Shah Muhammad II prepared for the Mongol response, he made the decision that transformed danger into disaster. Instead of concentrating his forces for decisive resistance, he dispersed them among major cities and fortresses. At first glance, this may have seemed prudent. Great cities had walls. Garrisons could delay invaders. A broad empire could absorb shocks. But the logic was ruinous. Dispersed defense ceded initiative. It allowed the Mongols to isolate targets, choose sequences of destruction, and confront each strongpoint without facing the full military weight of the empire at once. The Shah turned urban centers into sacrificial islands. This is one of history's recurring strategic errors, confusing the distribution of forces with the preservation of power. Armies spread too thinly do not defend everything. They guarantee that each point falls alone. The campaign that followed in AD 1219 was among the most sophisticated invasions of the medieval world. The Mongols did not advance as a single obvious mass. They crossed difficult terrain in multiple columns, exploited surprise, and struck where defenders expected least. Desert routes and steppe approaches that should have seemed implausible became instruments of shock. This was not speed for its own sake. It was speed weaponized through intelligence and design. Otrar, where the original outrage had occurred, became more than a military target. It became a statement. Its fate would announce the Mongol doctrine of consequence. Betrayal of commercial trust and violation of diplomatic norms would not be forgotten, and they would not be answered privately. Imperial punishment had to be made legible. It had to be seen. But the campaign's true power emerged not only through destruction, but through sequencing. Each fall prepared the next. Each rumor accelerated surrender elsewhere. Each failure of Khwarazmian coordination taught local elites the same lesson. No relief was coming, and no map could save a ruler who could not impose strategic coherence. Bokhara fell with stunning speed. This mattered far beyond the city itself. Bokhara was a prestige center of the Islamic world. Its capture proclaimed that the Mongols were not confined to open country warfare. They could penetrate the urban core of Central Asia. They could break the symbolic heart of a settled civilization. They could transform a city's reputation into a weapon against every city still holding out. Prestige in imperial politics is never ornamental. It is a form of invisible infrastructure. Once shattered, roads remain, walls remain, tax offices remain, but confidence dissolves. Samarkand exposed the bankruptcy of the Shah's dispersed strategy even more brutally. It was one of his greatest cities, rich in symbolism and military significance. His garrison numbers on paper were formidable, but paper strength collapses when morale is uncertain, coordination is poor, and confidence in relief vanishes. A city does not fight on arithmetic alone. It fights on the belief that its resistance serves a larger plan. Samarkand discovered that there was no larger plan. Here, legitimacy began to hemorrhage. When the political center cannot protect its symbolic core, every subordinate begins conducting private calculations. Governors ask whether loyalty is fatal. Elites ask whether accommodation is wiser than martyrdom. Soldiers ask whether commanders know more than they reveal, or less than they pretend. The empire had not yet fully died on the battlefield, but it had begun dying in the minds of its own defenders. Shah Muhammad II responded not with a decisive counterstroke, but with flight. Retreat is not always cowardice. At times it preserves the state, but retreat without strategic clarity becomes theater of collapse. As the Shah moved across his domains, confusion spread behind him. His presence no longer organized resistance. It advertised disintegration. Every movement of the sovereign signaled to local authorities that survival would depend not on imperial rescue, but on individual improvisation. The Mongols understood this perfectly. Their detachments did not hunt only armies. They hunted decision-making capacity. They severed communication routes, broke confidence networks, and dismantled the myth of Khwarazmian invulnerability. This is what modern observers often miss when they reduce Mongol warfare to speed and terror. Those were instruments. The deeper objective was systemic paralysis. Jeeb and Subutai, among the most formidable commanders of the era, exemplified this style of war. They pursued not merely territory, but strategic collapse. Pursuit operations became political operations. Every successful chase, every unexpected crossing, every shattered expectation enlarged the radius of Mongol power. The Shah could no longer rely on distance. He could no longer rely on surprise. He could no longer rely on assumptions inherited from older wars. That is why this campaign felt apocalyptic to contemporaries. It was not just that cities fell. It was that the old grammar of security ceased to function. Urgence revealed another side of Mongol warfare. The campaign was not uniformly effortless. Resistance there proved severe, and the struggle became especially brutal. But that, too, forms part of the lesson. Mongol success did not depend on a single template. When speed and psychological collapse sufficed, they exploited both. When resistance demanded grim persistence, they escalated. Adaptation, not mere momentum, made them terrifying. Therefore, the war convinced much of Eurasia that the Mongols could do the impossible. They could cross deserts. They could divide forces without losing coherence. They could reduce major cities. They could punish sovereign arrogance across immense distances. Reputation became a strategic multiplier. An empire falls twice, first in confidence, then on the battlefield. The Khwarazmian Empire now entered the second death. The immediate shockwaves were immense. Urban populations recognized that walls alone were insufficient against an enemy combining intelligence, mobility, engineering adaptation, and psychological warfare. Regional rulers from the Caucasus to China had to recalculate the meaning of security. States built to survive familiar threats now faced an adversary that made familiar assumptions obsolete. For the Mongols, victory yielded more than territory. It produced proof of concept for world empire. A rising regional power had now shattered one of Central Asia's major political structures. This was not simply expansion. It was validation. If Khwarazm could be unmade, then perhaps no settled empire was beyond reach. Such moments alter history because they change what rulers believe is possible. The destruction of the Khwarazmian order reordered trade, migration, and military expectation across Eurasia. Routes shifted, populations moved, courts recalibrated policy under the shadow of a new force whose aura seemed almost metaphysical. But the aura was never mystical. It was manufactured through repeated demonstrations that adaptation outmatched complacency, that intelligence outpaced prestige, and that systems capable of learning under pressure would devour systems trapped inside ceremonial confidence. This is the harsh truth of statecraft at the center of the story. Prosperity can disguise weakness. Rich cities and abundant revenues can persuade a ruling class that institutions are healthier than they are. But if commanders mistrust one another, if local elites doubt the center, if information is filtered through pride, and if rulers confuse dignity with wisdom, then apparent strength becomes brittle. The murder of envoys carries an enduring significance because diplomacy is civilization's pressure valve. Ambition is normal among states. Suspicion is normal. Rivalry is normal. But diplomacy allows dangerous conflicts to remain negotiable. Once envoys are dishonored and channels severed, grievance tends to become absolute. A reversible mistake becomes a test of total submission. The Otrar incident was grave. The Shah still had options. Redress could have isolated the governor, preserved trade, and bought time. Pride refused the climb down. Therefore, annihilation entered the realm of possibility. On the level of information, the contrast is even more revealing. Genghis Khan acted through reconnaissance, decentralized initiative, and disciplined execution. Shah Muhammad II acted through prestige politics, suspicion, and fragmented control. One system processed reality faster than the other. In war, speed of understanding often matters more than size of treasury. Human beings repeatedly overvalue what is visible and undervalue what is dynamic. Walls are visible. Gold is visible. Titles are visible. But trust inside a command structure, flexibility inside doctrine, and the capacity to absorb new information under stress, these are less theatrical and far more decisive. Khwarazm, therefore, did not fall only because it faced Genghis Khan. It fell because it misread the kind of power approaching its frontier. It treated a learning empire as if it were merely a raiding confederation. It answered a diplomatic crisis as if prestige management were strength. It scattered its defenses as though geography could substitute for coherence. It discovered too late that large empires are not necessarily resilient ones. This is why the campaign remains so modern in its implications. Many powerful systems still overestimate static assets and underestimate adaptive networks. Many leaders still mistake insult management for strategy. Many institutions still imagine that scale can compensate for rigidity. The names change. The pathology persists. There is also a darker lesson about human nature. Pride rarely announces itself as pride. It prefers the language of honor, sovereignty, firmness, and resolve. It tells rulers that backing down invites contempt. It whispers that apology is weakness. But in strategic life, the refusal to correct a mistake often costs far more than the mistake itself. The governor's crime began the crisis. The Shah's ego made it terminal. The verdict, as the historical dust settles, is mercilessly clear. The Mongols became unstoppable not because they were invincible, but because too many rivals answered a new kind of power with old assumptions. Khwarazm's tragedy was not simply that it faced Genghis Khan. It was that it misunderstood what he represented until the map itself began to burn. The true price of imperial arrogance was not only the fall of cities, but the collapse of an entire way of thinking about security, legitimacy, and time. The modern mirror is impossible to ignore. States and institutions still live by trade routes, information networks, and fragile channels of negotiation. They still depend on competent subordinates, honest intelligence, and the ability to distinguish symbolic satisfaction from strategic success. When leaders punish messengers, elevate vanity over adaptability, and confuse surface magnificence with internal resilience, history begins to rhyme with unnerving precision. The legacy question remains, and it is not easily answered. When a civilization meets an unfamiliar form of power, what destroys it first, the enemy's strength, or its own inability to recognize that the rules have already changed?